When you think of a cruise ship, what comes to mind? Probably the crystal blue ocean, endless buffets, smiling staff, and maybe even a deck party or two under the stars. It's marketed as the ultimate escape from reality, luxury on water. But what if I told you that behind the cocktails and the cabanas, there's a reality you're not supposed to see? Cruise ships are floating cities. They carry thousands of people, operate around the clock, and promise the kind of relaxation that most of us dream about. But just like any city, there's a hidden infrastructure, and not all of it is pretty. In fact, once you start digging, the whole idea of carefree cruising becomes a little less glamorous and a lot more complicated. Let's start with something most passengers never really think about: waste. Not just trash, but sewage, chemicals, food waste, and even oily bilge water from the ship's engines. Cruise lines often boast about their eco-friendly efforts, but here's the truth. Many cruise ships have been fined millions of dollars for illegal dumping, falsifying records, and violating environmental regulations. One of the world's largest cruise companies was caught in a years-long scheme to dump oil-contaminated waste into the ocean and then cover it up. And they weren't the only ones. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but that's in the past, right? Not exactly. While technology has improved and some ships are cleaner than others, environmental watchdogs still raise red flags regularly. The problem isn't just about what gets dumped, it's about the volume. A single cruise ship can generate tens of thousands of gallons of waste per day. Multiply that by hundreds of ships sailing around the world, and the ocean doesn't seem quite so blue anymore. But it's not just the environment that's taking a hit. There's also the matter of who's working behind the scenes to keep your vacation looking perfect. While you're sipping cocktails on the sun deck, thousands of crew members are working 10 to 14-hour shifts, 7 days a week, often for months at a time. Many of them come from developing countries, lured in by the promise of a good paycheck and the chance to see the world. But the reality? It's often long hours, cramped living quarters below deck, and wages that sometimes amount to less than $2 an hour when you break it down. And if you're wondering whether they can just quit if it gets too rough, think again. Most cruise ship workers are bound by strict contracts. Some even have their passports held for security reasons while they're on board. Others are charged fees just to get hired in the first place, putting them in debt before they've even stepped onto the ship. It's a system that works great for the cruise companies, and not so great for the people making your trip possible. And we're just getting started. You see, cruise vacations are carefully crafted illusions. Everything is designed to feel seamless. You're ushered from port to port with smiling staff and smooth itineraries, but underneath that shiny surface is a logistical and ethical maze that most passengers never think to question. Let's talk about what happens when you dock. Cruise lines love to advertise exploring new cultures and supporting local economies. But in reality, many ports of call are controlled by the cruise companies themselves. They build private beaches, shopping centers, and curated tourist traps where passengers are subtly funneled toward cruise-owned businesses. That means most of the money you spend on land, whether it's for food, souvenirs, or excursions, doesn't actually go to the local communities you think you're visiting. It goes right back into the cruise line's pocket. And if you think cruise ships pay their fair share for using these ports and infrastructure, think again. Because many of the ships are registered in what are called flags of convenience. That means a cruise line based in, say, the US or Europe might register its ship in countries like Panama, the Bahamas, or Liberia. Why? Because those countries have incredibly loose regulations, lower taxes, and fewer labor protections. It's a legal loophole that lets massive corporations avoid environmental oversight, dodge taxes, and sidestep accountability when things go wrong. And speaking of things going wrong, what about safety? Cruise ships might look like floating palaces, but they're still isolated vessels in the middle of the ocean. Fires, collisions, medical emergencies, they happen more often than you'd think. And when they do, response time isn't always ideal. Some ships don't have proper medical facilities or trained doctors on board. And if a serious crime takes place, things get even murkier. Here's the thing, because of those flags of convenience, the legal system that governs a cruise ship doesn't match where it actually sails. A ship sailing through the Caribbean might technically fall under the jurisdiction of a tiny island nation with almost no enforcement capacity. So if something happens, assault, theft, even a disappearance, it can be incredibly difficult to prosecute or investigate. Victims are left in limbo. Families often never get answers. It's not a bug in the system, it is the system. And while cruise lines tout their safety records, they rarely talk about how many incidents are swept under the rug. There are documented cases of employees and passengers simply vanishing at sea. Some are presumed suicides, others, no one knows. In many of these situations, cruise companies launch internal investigations, but they're under no obligation to report findings publicly. For an industry that serves millions of people every year, that level of secrecy should raise more questions than it does. You might be wondering, why haven't we heard more about this? Why isn't it a bigger scandal? The answer is simple: money. The cruise industry is worth over $150 billion globally. They have powerful lobbying arms, polished PR teams, and a lot of influence over media coverage and government regulations. But the truth, it's still out there. And once you know where to look, it becomes impossible to unsee. Once you start peeling back the curtain, it becomes clear that cruise ships operate in a kind of parallel world, one where normal rules don't always apply, and where accountability is more of a suggestion than a standard. But here's the wild part: most people don't care, or at least they don't care yet. Because the cruise industry is banking on one powerful human tendency: out of sight, out of mind. And let's be real, who doesn't want an escape? Life on land can be stressful, exhausting, overwhelming. So when a cruise promises to take care of everything for you, from your meals to your entertainment to your sense of adventure, it's incredibly appealing. It's sold as freedom, when in reality it's carefully managed confinement. You're not just a guest, you're part of a tightly choreographed system. And if that system's priorities conflict with your well-being or your values, you probably won't find out until it's too late. Now let's talk about health. During the pandemic, cruise ships made headlines for all the wrong reasons. They were called floating petri dishes, and for good reason. Thousands of passengers stranded at sea, outbreaks spreading unchecked, ships being denied entry into ports for weeks. But here's what most people didn't realize. Even before COVID-19, cruise ships had a long history of infectious disease outbreaks. Norovirus, a highly contagious stomach virus, has been plaguing cruise ships for years. It spreads like wildfire in confined spaces, and cruise ships are a textbook example of that. And when illness breaks out, it's not just the passengers who suffer. Crew members are often the first to get sick, the last to receive medical attention, and the most exposed due to their working conditions. Quarantine protocols can be chaotic. Sanitation measures, while heavily promoted in brochures, often lag behind in practice. The truth is, cruise ships are not built for public health emergencies. They're built for profit, efficiency, and optics. But even without a virus on board, life for cruise ship workers is tough. Off hours barely exist. Many crew members share tiny windowless cabins with roommates. Some live in spaces so small that standing up straight isn't an option. And their access to the amenities you enjoy as a guest, extremely limited. Most can't use the pools or fitness centers. They eat in separate areas, often with far fewer options and lower quality food. It's a world within a world, with a very clear line drawn between those being served and those doing the serving. There are stories, plenty of them, about abuse, harassment, exhaustion, and despair. And yet, many workers stay. Why? Because they have families depending on them. Because jobs are scarce in their home countries. Because even a low-paying cruise ship job can still offer more money than they'd make at home. It's not a fair trade, but for many it's the only one available. And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Every time we book a cruise, every time we rave about how amazing it was, we're helping to keep that machine running. Not necessarily because we mean to, but because we haven't been told the full story. Until now. Now, this isn't about guilt-tripping anyone who's been on a cruise. It's not wrong to want a break, to enjoy yourself, or to escape the stress of daily life. But we can't keep pretending that luxury comes without a cost, especially when that cost is paid by someone else's health, dignity, or basic rights. The cruise industry thrives because it's mastered the art of invisibility. The waste is dumped far from shore. The workers' struggles happen below deck. The legal loopholes are buried in pages of corporate documents. But when you shine a light on all of it, When you really take a moment to see what's happening, it starts to feel less like a dream vacation and more like a perfectly polished illusion. One that depends on you not asking too many questions. But here's the thing, you can ask questions. You can choose to look a little deeper before booking that next trip. You can support companies that are working to treat their workers fairly and prioritize sustainability, even if they're not as flashy or Instagram-worthy. You can tell others what you've learned, not out of judgment, but out of awareness. Because change doesn't happen from the top. It starts with people choosing to care. And believe it or not, there are already cracks forming in the glossy exterior of the cruise industry. More whistleblowers are coming forward. Environmental activists are pushing harder than ever. Countries are starting to question the benefits of letting megaships dock in their ports while taking home so little in return. The narrative is shifting, but slowly. And it needs a push. So maybe next time you see a cruise ad with smiling families and sparkling waves, you'll remember what's happening just out of frame. The workers who haven't seen their families in 9 months. The waste being dumped into oceans we claim to love. The corners being cut in the name of cost and convenience. And maybe, just maybe, that'll lead you to ask a simple question. Is this escape really worth the price? You don't need to swear off cruises forever. But you deserve to know the full story. Not the one written in travel brochures or polished Instagram posts, but the real one. Because only when we know the truth can we choose something better. So if this video gave you a new perspective, share it. Talk about it. Question the next glossy ad you see, and most importantly, remember, even in an industry built on illusions, the truth still floats to the surface. Thanks for watching, stay curious and stay awake.